Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Okay.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I am happy to introduce you to today's guest, Lisa Greenhut. She's the author of the Pregnancy Journal and Coloring Book, and she's calling in from the New York City area. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, Tammy. Thanks for having me today.
No problem. I'm really excited because I think that the pregnancy journal coloring book idea is really a good one because I have 3 children myself, so I know what it's like to go through that 9 months or 10 months, I guess, in reality, of the anticipation, the planning, of the worries, the happiness, all the ups and downs and the feelings that you get. So tell me a little bit about how you decided to start publishing adult coloring books, and specifically, how did you come up with this idea about the pregnancy journal coloring book?
Okay, well, I am a big fan of a lot of different creative pursuits. And like many people, the adult coloring book craze caught my attention. I'm a teacher in my day job, and I commute into New York regularly. So a lot of times I'd be sitting on the subway with my coloring book out, and I would be getting comments from random people about what I was coloring and how cool it looked and how detailed it was. And it really sparked my creativity in a way that is different from some of the other hobbies that I have. It's structured, but there's a lot of creativity involved with it. You can do, maybe if I colored in 2 little circles on my commute when I finally got a seat on the train and then I had to get off, I could pick it right back up when I got to the next place that I had the opportunity to do it. It was something that I could start doing with the materials I already had, although I did definitely buy like the big gel pack of all the nice glittery pens, because it was really enjoyable to me. And every time I went into a bookstore or a papyrus or any store, it seemed like the coloring books were creeping in there, and it was really just inspiring. And then at the same time, I have one son who's going to be 3, and that was a good pregnancy. But like you said, there's a lot of worry and anticipation, and I went 2 weeks late with him. So it was also the waiting and the ruminating, and you're sitting in the doctor's office, and there's all these other people ahead of you. And it was a very nerve-wracking experience for me. And I wish that I had something like a coloring book that I could have used at that time. I think it would have really helped me get through some of those anxious times. And I also felt, just as a person, that I was being transformed and I was changing, that this was going to change my life completely, that I was going to become fundamentally different in my life because of the fact that I was becoming a mother. And I did a lot of writing and journaling. I tried buying all these different pregnancy journals. I have like a bunch of them sitting on my shelf, and I wrote a few times in each of them, but it just wasn't the right format for what I wanted to do. And again, I wish that I had something that was more guided writing prompts and more creative based, and something where I really had room. And I also have very big handwriting. So I find that a lot of the lines on journals that I pick up in the store, they are beautiful. And then I open them up and I can't fit my handwriting in there. So, I felt that it was really something that I could have used to have something for the creative outlet, for that meditative calm feeling that coloring gives me, and a format that I would have really liked. So all of that kind of came together for me, and I was interested in getting into publishing my own books. I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to be an author. And so this was a project that sort of spoke to me as something that, I'm my own ideal customer, because it's something that I really would have wanted to buy myself.
Oh, that's really cool. So when you design your books, Are these hand-drawn designs? Are these computer generated?
So I create everything myself. So I'm not going online and finding pictures and then manipulating them. I design everything myself. I do use the computer to create the patterns and the outlines. And then I go in there with my fine tip microns later and I add in the final touches. So that way I can make sure that everything's really clean and crisp lines and symmetrical and, the sort of design that I would like to color myself. When I pick up books, I'm drawn to all different visual styles, but I definitely like the nice, crisp, clean lines where I know exactly where my color can go. So I use all the tools that I have available to me to try to produce that in my own work.
So what type of images are you creating? And do you create themes, or how do you determine what goes into the books that you're creating?
So for the pregnancy coloring book, it's going to be a mix of mandala styles where, there are repeating designs where, they're usually circular and they have a lot of detailed areas where you can go in and make a pattern or do, different color designs. I know that everybody has their own personal style. So I wanted to leave it open in that respect and not, suggest or force people to color in a certain way, because I think that the creativity is such a huge part of it. But I like a lot of geometric shapes and floral shapes. And, I don't want to get into, I've looked up some coloring books for pregnancy and it's a very specific type. It seems almost like goddess imagery, which is very beautiful, but it doesn't personally speak to me. So I'm not doing, and it's not images of like people giving birth or anything like that. It's more the type of images that I would like to color myself, which is really mandalas and repeating patterns. And some are going to be little, because I know that people have a range that they like to color. So, there's the detail work for people who are really into the intricate designs. But I know at a certain point in my pregnancy, a lot of people develop carpal tunnel syndrome in their third trimester, or you just get tired in your muscles. So I wanted to also have some designs that could be just a quick color, with a thicker pen or material, so that people can enjoy it at all stages. And one of my friends asked me if she could color some of the drawings in using crayon, which I don't typically use for coloring books because I find it a little bit limiting. Like the point just isn't fine enough. So, I'm thinking about ways to work that in so that she can, pick up her daughter's crayons and color some of those in as well. But I think that I think they need to look visually coherent. Like, I don't think that when you open up any book, it should look like the images come from 8 different types of books. I think that people are looking for a coherent experience, but also variety. We don't want every page to look exactly the same either. So I tried to find that balance and I hope it succeeded.
That's really interesting. I wanted to ask you something. You said that you have large handwriting. And so how much room in your journal, how did you figure out how much? I take it that you make lines for people to write on or not?
I think that there may be a mix. I personally like lines when I'm writing because I find that I end up going diagonal at a certain point, especially if I'm really worked up and I'm journaling to get my emotions out. If I start with a blank page, then I'm like almost vertical by the time I finish.
Oh.
So I wanted to provide a structure there. And if people wanted that, I think that it would be nice to have some blank pages as well with like a nice border or mandala in one side. Actually, as a teacher, I work with special needs students. I've been doing that for about 15 years. And a lot of my students who have writing difficulties, a lot of it is handwriting based. So when I design worksheets and, activities for the children to do, I'm very used to sort of designing out how far apart the lines need to be so that their handwriting will fit. And I find it so frustrating to watch when they're working in a workbook or something and they just can't make things fit on the lines or the boxes that have been given because somebody wasn't thoughtful about how much room they would need. And then they have to go and do it on another piece of paper and it gets confusing and it interrupts their flow. And that's the same experience that I have when I'm trying to write in a journal that just doesn't accommodate my writing. So, when I always print out the pages as I'm designing them and try writing on it to myself so that I ensure that it's comfortable, and that way, if somebody does have slightly smaller writing, it will fit them just fine. But I know that they will be in the flow of what they're doing and not consciously trying to write less or make it fit or, interrupting the experience in any way.
I really think that that's really a good idea. And that's really interesting how you're able to take your teaching background and apply it to creating something that maybe a lot of people wouldn't think about, accommodating someone's size of handwriting, knowing that if you write smaller, you'll be perfectly fine, but that the lines could bother someone who did have a larger handwriting. I think that's really intuitive of you to pick that up and so that you can help people with that. And I remember there are times when you're pregnant that your hands don't work right, your thoughts don't work right.
Sure. Yeah.
You get a few things going. So it'd be nice to be able to have that. So in the future, are you planning on creating other books for other audiences?
Probably. I think, I have a young child myself and at some point, if he becomes a sibling, that's something that I can imagine that might be nice, like a book that we could create for him to work through his feelings about becoming an older sibling and, providing a keepsake to the younger sibling. I also think a lot about my own parents and what they are interested in leaving as a legacy for my children. And, I'm also the family historian. So I collect documents and photographs of, family members. And I think it would be beautiful if someone wanted to leave a keepsake for a grandchild or even a great grandchild, then it might just become a family affair. And so, I also think about myself as the mother of a child who's still quite young and, the letters that I want to write to him and, the material that I would like to give to him when he gets older. So I might design something for myself, to write some letters and to do some coloring and, just make it a really beautiful keepsake, for my son. And I think that other people might enjoy that too.
I think a lot of people would appreciate that, to leave something behind. And I think artistic things are always something that people appreciate because there's so much love and energy that goes into that creation of and coloring of something. So why do you think that now that adult coloring books just seem to be exploding, and why are people so excited about them?
It is fascinating. And I've heard that this kind of debated a lot about, what is it about coloring books that has just taken the publishing world by storm? I think that, on the positive side, I think that people are really looking for that creativity and that artistic feeling in their daily lives. I think that many of us are mistakenly told growing up, directly or indirectly, that we're not artists or we're not good at art. And when people think about creating something, it can seem a little intimidating to have a totally blank page, or they might feel that it's not going to look the way that they want it to look. But when they open up a coloring book, it's something that feels familiar from childhood. And it's one small step at a time. It's very manageable. Like I said, you can pick it up, you can put it down. If you turn the page, you can have another whole new design to try. So it provides a little bit of structure. So that's all the positive reasons why I think they're so great and why people are responding to them. And, that immediate gratification of I produced something and it's beautiful. I think on the negative side, it's a symptom of our modern life that we're so stressed and so busy. And, being an adult in our modern society can be really hard. There's so much to keep track of, even if you're not experiencing a big life change like pregnancy or, anything like that. But especially if you are, there's a lot going on, and people need an outlet to express their emotions and not just like wallowing in the anxiety or the fear or the anger or whatever emotions are coming up. I think that this is a way of working through some of those feelings, in a non-threatening way, in a non-verbal way, because we talk and everybody bears their soul, they're on social media or, on a reality TV or something like that. But I think that this is a way of transforming those feelings into something that's more of a creative expression rather than just, throwing them out there for everyone to see. So I think, and finally, I think the other thing is that we've become a very virtual society. And this is something really real and concrete, that you pick up a pen and you work on a piece of paper and the color spreads out on the paper in front of you. And it's not virtual. It's really like back to, old school, and I think that people really want something real. They want something they can hang on their wall. And then they want to post it on Instagram afterwards. But first they want something real, and then they can share it online. And if they choose to become part of like that larger community where people are sharing their artwork and cheering each other on.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've also read that there are a lot of health benefits to coloring. How do you look at that, and how have you incorporated what you've read about the health benefits into what you're publishing?
Right. I'm not a medical doctor, obviously, but I have read a lot of studies about the benefits of mindfulness and meditation and yoga and all of those more contemplative, repetitive things that help to improve your mental health and by extension, your physical health, like reduce the stress hormones, feel calmer, lower your heart rate, lower your blood pressure. To me, coloring can be a form of meditation, and it is calming. And, I think that, when I was working full time as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, I experimented with doing coloring pages with my students first thing in the morning. We would just print. We started off with pretty simple ones. And I found that a lot of the students who struggled somewhat with having a more like frenetic movement, not really able to settle down, transitioning into the school day could be hard. They really responded very positively to having the opportunity to color. Not every single child. There were, I'd say the majority of them really liked it. And then there were a few who chose to enjoy something else, which was fine. But for the kids who were doing it, it really helped them to settle into their day. And then they had something beautiful at the end to sort of show for it. In addition to all of that, just the coloring benefits, writing and journaling is a really key strategy for dealing with trauma and difficult emotions, as well as documenting all of the wonderful things that you want to share. It's a great way to manage stress, and there's a lot of research about that. So I wanted to incorporate both of those things into the pregnancy journal and coloring book. And like I said, I really, as a pregnant woman myself, really would have benefited from having that opportunity.
I like that because you really explained a lot about how both coloring and writing can really help to manage just your day-to-day lives. There's one of the things I know in this day and age is perfectionism. And I've on the Facebook groups, I've seen some people, they're always worried about, am I doing this right? Am I coloring in the right way? What do you think? Is there a best way to color?
Oh my goodness. I definitely don't think that there's a best way. And I have seen that both among adults who are interested in coloring and producing something beautiful, and even the children that I've worked with who, are worried about, does it look good enough? Do you like it? And I think that's a habit that we pick up early in life. And, this worry about what other people are going to think, and the judgment and wanting the approval. And I really think that everybody has their own personal style, and there really is no one best way, and different people are going to respond to different colors and different patterns. And that's why it's so wonderful that there's such a diversity of choices out there of what to color and how detailed you want to get, and different art materials. And it really, to me, it would be great if it was about being free to explore and create and to go with the flow. And if your pen slips, to just go with the slip and see where that takes you. And you might discover something that you didn't intend is actually more interesting to the eye and more beautiful, and more original, than if you had just done it by the numbers. I mean, it really, to me, it's great when it looks like a person did it and not like a perfectly tuned machine. I have a method that I use when I'm coloring in designs, whether they're my own or someone else's. I sort of pick a color that I like. I start wherever I kind of feel like. If I feel like coloring a small area, I start there. If I feel like starting with a big area, usually not, but if I do, I start there. And then I choose a second color that kind of strikes me as maybe going in a good way with the first. If I get stuck, I just kind of switch it up, but I just try to keep it flowing, and I try not to overthink it, because I don't want it to become work, and I don't want it to become my job to make a perfectly colored piece. I want it to be sort of mirroring on the outside, kind of my flow on the inside. So, and it really, I understand why people take pride in their work and want it to look their best. But I think if you put your time and energy into something and your emotions, like, it is going to be great no matter what. So I just would love for, I would love for our conception of what it means to make art and what it means to be an artist to really expand beyond it looking perfect.
Wow, that's really a beautiful thought. So when you're coloring, what do you like to use? I know that they can use pens, gel pens, markers, crayons, ink, colored pencils, mixed media, crayons. What do you like to use?
Well, I like really a number of things, but the main thing is that, it has to have a fine enough tip for me to get into the details. So, I don't typically use my son's crayons, for example. I actually really like to color with crayons, but most adult coloring books just don't allow for that sort of size tip. So I have a set of gel pens that I've basically used up because I've used them so much. And I have 2 sets of colored pencils, different brands. I don't have a particular brand that I love, but I just go with whatever color strikes me at that moment. And I just started experimenting with some watercolor pens. And that's been really interesting. I have one that has a pretty fine tip, and that's been really interesting to try. So I really like when I go online and I see what people are doing with all the different kinds of art materials. It's so inspiring, and it always gives me like something new to add to my wish list because I want to try everything.
So try it. You might like it. Mm-hmm. Can you give us 3 tips about how to get the best results, especially if you're trying to get really good results for keeping a keepsake, for something for a long time, or maybe something that you would like to hang on the wall or to give as a gift? What 3 tips would you give people about that?
The first I would say is to take pictures as you go, because you can see as if you take photos over time as you're working on something, you can kind of see the picture emerging. I find that really fun. I really like to post works in progress onto Instagram or, Facebook or something like that. And I noticed a lot of other people like to do the same, that like it sort of documents the process. So even though making something to be a finished product is really great, I also really think the process is important. So I like taking pictures as I'm going. I think the second thing, if you want the colors to really look a certain way, is to try them out on a piece of scrap paper. See if you like how they go together. You know, if it's a brand new set and you're just opening up like your beautiful markers for the first time, you want to try it out on like a little grid or a scrap paper to see if the color on that paper actually looks the same as it does like on the side of the marker or on the box. So that way you don't get an unpleasant surprise if you start using the color and it isn't what you thought. So I don't mind surprises personally, but I know some people have specific designs or visuals that they want to achieve. So I think just taking that moment to scribble on the side and see if you like how it looks will just prevent some frustration. And I think the final one, which I think is the most important, is that if you slip up, you know, if you are doing a complicated design and you color in the wrong, you know, not the pattern that you were intending, or if it slips a little bit, or if you get it a little bit outside the lines, just leave it. You know, I think that, you know, we spend so many hours looking at these designs, we notice every little bump, but when you're showing it to someone, what they're going to be looking at is the entire picture. They're not going to be scouring over your work to pick up that one little tiny place where, you know, you did red twice instead of alternating it with orange or something. And I think sometimes I've done this myself when I'm showing someone my work and I say, oh, but I messed up over here. They say, oh, I never would have noticed that if you hadn't shown me. So don't show them. Just leave it. You know, if you start trying really hard to fix it up, then, you know, it might only make it more obvious. And who knows, you might discover that it actually looks great the way that it is. And it could be more serendipity than a mistake per se. I really think there are no mistakes in art. I really do. So I think that, you know, just having that ease about it, it might also just make the experience more relaxed and you're more present with what you're doing and you're not worried about making mistakes. And then it'll just flow the way that you want.
So relax, go with the flow. I think that's good advice. So do you think that this whole adult coloring book thing is a fad or is it here to stay?
Well, I think it's probably both, because right now it's a bit of a novelty. You know, the market has exploded so exponentially. But there's a reason for that. If it weren't connecting with people, if it weren't fulfilling some sort of need for people, then no one would be buying these books and they wouldn't have had the success that they're having. So I think it might level off in the sense of, you know, it won't keep growing and growing exponentially all the time. It might get to a point where the market's a bit saturated. But I think that it's striking some kind of chord with people, and I can see it really sticking around and, you know, providing enjoyment for a long time to come.
I agree. I see everywhere I go, I see new coloring books, but at the same time, there's also beautiful that I'd like to collect. You know, I see they're like something that you would collect over time, so that I want that one, I want that one, I want that one. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the business side of coloring books, since it is a lot of people are seeing that it's a good business opportunity. So I wanted to ask you about that. If I wanted to start creating coloring books or coloring pages, what should I do? How should I start?
Okay. I think the first thing would be to figure out what you like as the customer, or what you would want to spend a lot of time working on, because this isn't something that when you're creating coloring pages, it does take a lot of time and it takes a lot of focus. And so I really wouldn't recommend that somebody pick a design or a theme that they're not really willing to spend all that time on, because they're not going to enjoy it at all. And I think it will show through eventually in the work that you're producing. If you like pictures of nature, then I would say go with pictures of nature. If you like to draw mandalas or color in mandalas, go with that. I wouldn't commit to spending all the time and effort producing something that you're not going to love yourself. I think your very first customer should be yourself. If you decide upon a theme or a type of artwork, I think the next thing is to figure out what you want to do to produce it. Do you want to hand draw it? Do you want to pursue, some different software options? Do you want to do a combination? If there's a lot of resources online, I find YouTube to be just fantastic for this, but there's other places as well, giving people how-tos on how to draw a really even mandala, or how to take a picture and, turn it into a color page. I think the only thing on that is just to make sure that you're respecting copyright, because images online can be licensed. So if you're if you're interested, let's say you're like a huge Doctor Who fan like I am, you can't just be like, I'm going to produce a Doctor Who coloring book, because you don't own the rights to those characters and those likenesses. So you want to spend time doing coloring books. You don't want to spend time with lawyers and legal fees, so you're going to want to make sure that you have permission to use anything that you're using as the basis of your work, if you're using anything in particular. And then I think to decide, do you want to publish this as a book? Do you want to sell it for profit? Do you want to just give it as a gift or make it for yourself? Because many people just make coloring pages for their own enjoyment. But if you want to pursue doing it as a book, then I think the next thing is to think about how you would like to do that. Do you want to go through Create Space on Amazon? Do you want to use another print on demand service? It's a whole other conversation about all the different options that self-publishers have. And like that market has really exploded as well in a great way. There's so many different services that someone could use. I think you have to think about how much money do you want to lay out for this project? Especially if you're just starting out and you're not sure if your idea is going to resonate with a very large group of customers. Do you want to go with a more basic service like Create Space, which is, you have access to Amazon's whole market, and start there, see how it does, build up your audience, and then maybe later on think about pursuing, a fancier paper or, a different distributor, once you have gotten your feet wet. But I think, there's a lot of different choices. It's almost to the point where it's so many choices that it can be a bit overwhelming. But I think if you're clear on who you're making it for and how far and wide do you want to see it go, that will sort of guide you towards what services and distributors are right for you. I think Amazon is a great choice. And when I was thinking about working with them, I called up the folks at Create Space to ask them about coloring books, and they were able to answer my questions very easily and, encourage me that there were a lot of other people who had published their books that way and been very happy with them. So, I did just a little bit of research to figure that out, and then I got down to trying it out myself.
So were the people at Create Space, were they easy to get a hold of, and did they answer your questions quickly?
They did. I actually, because I emailed them outside of business hours, what you can do is leave your contact information, and then a customer service representative will get back to you. So someone got back to me. I think I emailed them on a Saturday night or something, and they got back to me on Monday. And she was very nice and patient and wanted to be helpful. We had a nice discussion about all different products, not just the pregnancy journal and coloring book, which is what we talked about mainly. And she was able to answer most of my questions, which I was a great start. It was the information that I needed in order to get started. And I know, anytime that I have more questions, I can go back and she'll be available to answer more questions. But they really want to work with you and they want your book to succeed. They send you, the proof before the book is published. There's a lot of options for distribution. So even, you don't have 200 books lying around your house. Amazon has warehouses. And we went through all of those different options so that I walked away from the conversation feeling like I was ready to get started.
Well, that's really good to know because I know a lot of times people are intimidated and they feel like they can't get the help they need because of, it's Amazon, it's CreateSpace, but it's good to know that you can email them and that they do return the call and you actually get to talk to a real human.
Yes.
And because even though we're so used to playing in this virtual world, we all are seeking out that human contact, especially when we're trying to learn something new. So I'm really interested in asking you the next question, which is all about, do I need to be an artist to do this, to create coloring books or pages?
So I believe that everyone is an artist, but maybe some people are more in touch with that artist self than others. So when somebody says, oh, well, I'm not an artist, I always want to know why they think that and what's the story of how they came to feel that way? Because unfortunately, I think sometimes it's a result of how we're taught about art and our cultural messages about art, which can intimidate people from really doing the time and practice that would help them feel more like an artist. I definitely had this experience myself. I'm more of a language processor first. That's like my primary modality of how I like to communicate. It just so happens I worked with a lot of very visual people in my work. The kids that I've taught over the years, a lot of times are very gifted visually and they have natural talent in that area. So I've come to really appreciate, that's something that everyone can develop. But when I was in college, I decided to take a visual art class to see if I could work on that side of myself. And I was very intimidated at first. And I didn't, you're supposed to hang your pieces up on the wall and everyone looks at all the pieces and critiques. And for about the first month of sessions, I did not hang a single piece up. I absolutely felt like I didn't want anyone to see my work. It wasn't as good. It wasn't as polished. And eventually I had to get over that hump. And I think what was happening is that because I was feeling so down about my abilities, I wasn't exercising them. I wasn't practicing. I wasn't putting in the time. I think the proverbial 10,000 hours that it takes to become an expert at anything, if you start out feeling like you have no talent or you have no ability, what is the incentive for you to put in the time that real artists who are working every day, people who are making a living at their art, they are spending hours and hours really working on it and perfecting it. And it's not as though they sit down and they wave a magic wand and say the magic words and out comes a finished, polished piece of work that they feel ready to publish. This is something that develops over time. And I also think that there is an intuitive side to it, that everybody's visual style is different. What you like for yourself as a customer might be different than what somebody else likes. And so what you would produce as an artist is different than what somebody else might produce. One resource that's really helped me with this is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And she talks about like recovering your artist self, that everybody really is an artist and that people have had all of these harmful messages sort of telling them to go pursue something else. And a lot of times there are other like kind of limiting beliefs that go with that about making money with art or what kind of person is an artist. If you're an artist, does that mean that you have to dress like a hippie and like live in the village, whatever it might be, whatever stereotype you might have of, the starving artist stereotype is another thing that comes up a lot. And so once you unpack all of that, it kind of clears the way. And instead of getting hung up on like, the question is like, am I good enough? And it's like, the way that I feel about it is that you'll never know if you don't try, and that no one starts off at 100%, and just lays it all out and it's done in one take. Everybody who puts in the time and who tries and who gets feedback and goes back and tries some more and goes through that process, I really feel like this is something that's attainable for everyone. So, I would hate for someone to have something that they really want to create and get stuck feeling like they're not good enough.
So do it anyway. And
yes,
you are an artist, whether you think so or not. So how do you keep producing? You said that you often color on the subway. Do you create on the subway? How do you keep producing your coloring books and journals on a regular basis?
Right. I've had to develop a routine around it that works for me. And I think that, coloring for fun on the subway is one thing, but when I'm trying to design or, draw, it's not quite even enough, unfortunately. Now that my son is not a newborn anymore, he actually sleeps at night. So that's a really big help. I work every evening after my son goes to sleep. I have a more flexible work schedule now than I did in the past. I'm not working 5 days a week anymore. So I'm able to use some of his nap times as well. Sometimes I am out somewhere, not at my desk, and I'll be walking around and I will see coloring books around and I'll flip through them. And in a way, it's sort of like doing research, to see what great new things people are producing and, what people are interested in buying, and, sort of thinking of it almost like market research. Even if I'm just online at Whole Foods, there are now coloring magazines sitting alongside Yoga Journal and Cooking Light, in the checkout line at Whole Foods. So I'm able to do the thinking and the idea generation and just collecting visual information whenever I'm out. And the other thing that I like to do is go on Instagram, because there are so many people colorists who just mainly color in books, and also artists who are designing books, and people post pages, they post sketches. Sometimes people will post little videos of how, works in progress. And, it makes me feel like I'm part of something larger than myself. And it's also a great way for me to get ideas and also to get feedback about what seems to be popular and interesting for people, so even if I'm, standing online at the bank and I've got Instagram open on my phone, I'm able to sort of mull over the coloring book ideas in my mind. And then when I get home, I'm able, after my son goes to sleep, to sit down and try it for myself. And like I said, I always print out what I'm producing so that I can try it myself. And, that's a little bit more flexible when I can work on that. But I think making time for what you love to do every day. And, if you're starting something on the side that wasn't your main source of income before, I think like having a routine around it every day is really important. And sort of giving yourself that time in your schedule to devote to working on it. Even if it's just, an hour of nap time when your kid's asleep. I think over time, that hour a day, by the end of the week, that's 7 hours that you've been able to work on something that, if you're waiting to have 7 hours in a row, to what adult has that kind of time, unless it's your full-time job. And sometimes not even then, you're probably in a meeting for, parts of that time, or working on business tasks. I think that steady incremental time is, over time really adds up.
So like anything, just do it when you're able to, and over time it adds up. Like you said, an hour a day adds up to 7 hours of probably more pure uninterrupted time than if you were trying to do it in bigger chunks of time when you would get interrupted by different things. Before we wrap up, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share?
Just that this is such an exciting moment to be part of this industry because people have embraced this hobby that is so present and so real and tangible. And like I said before, we sometimes think of our modern life as just being all digital and, everything's virtual. And this is really something real. And I think it saved the publishing industry. I mean, everyone thought that ebooks were going to be it. But now it seems like people want something that they can hold in their hands. It's something hopeful about our culture. I think that people are seeking out opportunities to be creative and seeking out community around something really positive. And I know things can feel really dark and difficult sometimes in our modern world, but this is something that really, I think it's just positive all the way around. And I would love, when my son's generation grows up, I hope that they are able to enjoy this hobby the way that so many people do and use it for the stress relief and, working through their feelings. I think it's so great and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Where can we get more information about you, your books, and your services?
My website is turtlemoonpress.com, and you can go there to learn more about the pregnancy journal. If I have other books that are ready for a sneak peek, I'll post there as well. Right now, I have some sample pages that are available on the website, so you can sign up for my email list to see those. And I'm also on Instagram at Turtle Moon Press, and I post pictures of work as I'm going along and announcements about anything special that's coming up. So those are really just turtlemoonpress.com is where everything's going to be.
Well, thank you. Our guest today has been Lisa Greenhut, and I really appreciate all the time you took. And again, I highly recommend that everyone download the episode and go back and take some copious notes, because I think Lisa shared some really golden nuggets about not only the publishing industry, but about coloring in general and how it can help us in our everyday lives. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Tammy. This has been so much fun.
This is Tammy Patz.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.